It starts with curiosity, then convenience, then something darker. You're 14, maybe 16, maybe 25, and you've just discovered unlimited access to a version of intimacy that requires nothing from you. No rejection, no vulnerability, no risk, just pixels and dopamine. And in that moment, something subtle begins to break. Not loudly, not obviously, but deep in the wiring of how you'll see women, connection, and yourself for years to come. This is how it begins. Not with shame, not with addiction, but with a trade. You trade the complexity of real intimacy for the simplicity of a screen. And at first, it feels like freedom. No performance anxiety, no fear of inadequacy, no chance of being unwanted. But what you don't realize is that every time you choose that screen, you're training your brain to prefer isolation over connection. You're teaching yourself that women exist for consumption, not collaboration. That intimacy is a spectacle, not a conversation. That desire is something you take, not something you share. And the worst part, you don't even notice it happening. Psychologically, here's what's occurring. This type of compulsive behavior doesn't just flood your brain with dopamine, it rewires your reward system entirely. Natural attractions, the curve of a smile, the warmth of eye contact, the slow burn of anticipation. These things start to feel insufficient, boring, not enough, because your brain has been conditioned to expect supernormal stimuli, exaggerated features, instant gratification, novelty on demand. Real women with their complexities, boundaries, emotions, and humanity can't compete with an algorithm designed to hijack your limbic system. So slowly, insidiously, your perception fractures. Women stop being people. They become objects of evaluation. You start rating them in your mind without realizing it. You objectify without intention. You measure them against a fantasy that was never real to begin with. And when they don't meet that standard, when they're not available or enthusiastic or built like a curated highlight reel, something inside you feels cheated, resentful, entitled to more. This is where toxic mindsets begin to creep in. Not always, not for everyone, but for some, the resentment grows roots. Because if you've spent years consuming women as products, it becomes easier to blame them when reality doesn't deliver. She's not interested. She must be shallow. She has standards. She must be unrealistic. She chose someone else. The system must be rigged. You start constructing narratives where you're the victim and women are the gatekeepers of something you deserve. And that anger, that bitterness, it's not really about women at all. It's about the gap between what the fantasy promised you and what real intimacy requires. Effort, honesty, emotional availability. The very things the compulsion taught you to avoid. But let's go deeper, because this isn't just about how you see women, it's about how you see yourself. This pattern creates a devastating internal split. On the surface, you might be functional. You work, you socialize, you laugh at jokes. But underneath, there's a numbness, a flattening. You find yourself less excited by things that used to move you. Music feels duller. Conversations feel shallow. Even achievements feel hollow. This is emotional blunting, a documented side effect of chronic overstimulation. Your brain, overwhelmed by artificial peaks, starts dulling everything else just to cope. And so you become a man who feels less, who connects less, who, ironically, craves intimacy more desperately than ever, but has no idea how to build it. Because here's the cruel paradox. The more you engage in this behavior, the lonelier you become. And the lonelier you become, the more you engage. It's a feedback loop disguised as a solution. You tell yourself it's harmless, just stress relief, just a release. But deep down, you know. You know that the version of you that existed before this pattern was more alive, more present, more capable of being moved by another human being. And the version of you now, you're performing, going through motions, faking engagement while your mind drifts back to the screen, back to the safety of control, back to the place where no one can see how deeply you've disconnected. And relationships, they become minefields. If you manage to find one, you bring the habit with you like a shadow. You might struggle with performance, with presence, with seeing your partner as anything other than a role to fill. You might feel frustrated when intimacy isn't like what you've consumed, when it's awkward or slow or requires communication. You might even find yourself thinking about the content during real moments, which creates a sickening layer of guilt that you bury immediately because confronting it would mean confronting everything. So you stay silent. You keep the behavior hidden. You tell yourself you'll stop tomorrow, next week, after this one last time. But tomorrow never comes because the shame hides you, and hiding turns into a prison. You become a man split in two, the public self who's got it together, and the private self who's drowning in a habit that's stealing your ability to love, to feel, to connect with the very thing you claim to want most. Let's talk about what this pattern steals from you that you don't even realize is missing. It steals your attention span, your ability to be bored without reaching for stimulation. It steals your patience with people because real humans don't move at the speed of a click. It steals your capacity for awe because when you've seen everything, nothing surprises you anymore. It steals your self-respect because you know, on some level, that you're choosing fantasy over reality, comfort over courage. And maybe most tragically, it steals your belief that you're capable of being loved for who you are, not for what you perform or provide. Because when you've spent years hiding this part of yourself, when you've built entire identities around secrecy and shame, you start to believe that the real you is unlovable, that if anyone knew the extent of the habit, the frequency, the content, they'd leave. So you never let them get close enough to find out. And that distance, that wall you've built to protect your behavior, that's the same wall keeping you from the intimacy you're starving for. So, what now? If you've recognized yourself in any of this, if you felt that uncomfortable tug of truth, here's what you need to know. You're not broken beyond repair, but you are at a crossroads. And the first step isn't quitting cold turkey or shaming yourself into submission. The first step is honesty. Admit to yourself how much this is costing you. Tell someone you trust, a therapist, a friend, anyone who won't judge but will hold you accountable. Then, start rebuilding your relationship with discomfort, because this pattern taught you to escape it instantly. But real life, real connection, real growth, it all requires sitting with discomfort, boredom, awkwardness, uncertainty. Start small, delete the apps, install blockers. But more importantly, fill the void. Don't just remove the behavior. Replace it with something that actually nourishes you. Exercise, create, read, connect face to face with real humans. Relearn what it feels like to be present in your own life. And finally, forgive yourself, not as an excuse, but as a starting point, because shame will keep you trapped. You're not the sum of your worst habits. You're a person trying to find your way back to connection. And that journey, as hard as it is proof that you still care, that there's still a part of you that wants more than what the screen offers.